All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, introducing Mr. Walter Koenig. Let's keep that applause going. Walter Koenig.
Hi. This is sort of like one of those fashion parades where I walk up and down the... How's everybody today? Good. Yeah, good. It's been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you. How many people are here for the first time at a convention? Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So anyway, I have absolutely nothing to say unless you ask me a question. So I need to be spoken to. Hi, puppy. I love dogs. Okay. Anybody have a question? Yes, sir.
Good morning. What did you take as your inspiration to be the character you portrayed on Babylon 5, Mr. Bester?
Oh, that's an interesting question. My inspiration. My inspiration is really the challenge of playing a role that I had not really addressed in my career until that point. You know, the fun for actors is the challenge of finding in yourself the characters that have been inspired by a writer. What is it that I can click in with to be able not to pretend to be that person, but in a limited set of circumstances to be that character? What is it that drives me, that's part of my personality as it is for everybody else, that I can identify with, and then get a chance to express it. So the question very frequently is, the follow-up question, or the question instead of the one you asked, is, how do you feel about playing a bad guy? Well, I never thought of the character as a bad guy. You can't editorialize and say, oh, I'm playing a bad guy, because that's not the way bad guys think. You know, they for whatever reason, they feel that they're justified in their behavior. So I had to find the reasons for the things that I did and embrace them and make myself feel that it was worth supporting those ideas. And I did. You know, the telepaths were a minority. They were looked down upon. They were considered an antagonist and to the people who were in the majority. So I had I seized that loyalty to my people, and I went from there. Okay, that's sort of the circumlocucious answer to the question. Next.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming to see us this weekend.
You bet.
We're so happy you're here. I was going to ask you about big conventions like this and what it's like for you to visit them. What is your favorite thing about a convention, and what is the most challenging thing for you?
That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question as well. Are you all going to ask me an interesting question? Good. Well, you know, I'm getting to be an old guy, and my services are not as much in demand as they were even 10 years ago. So I like the idea that people would like to meet me and talk to me and ask me about my life, because after all, I am an actor, and that's all we are, is what people think of us. You know, it's so shallow, but it's true. So I feel a lot of reinforcement when I come to conventions. People are very pleasant. They're very, and I say they tell me how much they like the shows that I was on, and it gives me a good feeling. The only thing I don't like, the only thing at this juncture, is the flying. You know, 5.5, 6 hours flying back and forth across the country and then overseas. because I've been to Germany 7 or 8 times. I've been to the UK 8 or 9 times. I've been to Russia, which was an extraordinary experience for me. So, yeah, at this point, it's the traveling that's the only thing that I'm not that comfortable with.
Thank you. Star Trek is my family's comfort food. It's like macaroni and cheese. So thank you very much.
Yes, I just want to say it's an honor to meet you, and I wanted to ask you about the fan production, Star Trek Renegades, or just Renegades now after the new rules. I just wanted to ask how your approach to Chekhov had changed since the character's evolved so much in his appearance in Renegades as an admiral, starting this team.
Well, evolved is really a euphemism for old. Character's gotten old, and guess what? So have I. So it was not necessarily a hard study to play him as an older man. Walter Koenig is an older man. So, but I did enjoy the opportunity to give him some dimension. My complaint has always been it's very complex and makes me uncomfortable. Is that there's always been more reinforcement and more approbation for my work than I deserved. And I don't say that because I'm such an incredibly humble person. It's because he didn't have a lot to do. Warp Vector 4, Warp Vector 4, Warp Vector 4. How many different ways can you say it? So, so when something comes along like the couple of episodes that I did for TV, for the iTunes or whatever the hell it was for, and the fact that the character grew old, as a young man, and he was going to die. What does that mean? How do I get to re-examine Chekhov or examine him in a way that brings some depth to who he is? I mean, he's growing old and he's going to die in a couple of days, and there's a lot that you go through. It's that whole thing about denial and indifference and all of the wish fulfillment and all the things that transpire when something awful is going to happen. So it was fun for me to have that opportunity to contribute that to the character, to give him some more dimension than he really ever had an opportunity on the show. So I don't remember what your question was. What was your
You answered it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Erin. I was wondering, in The Last Voyage Home with the Whales, I loved your role in that film, and I was wondering what your favorite part about filming that movie was.
You were wondering what?
What you enjoyed most about filming the movie with the whales?
Oh, okay. I had a bigger part. And it was a fun role, and the movie, was saying something germane, something that really testified to the world as it is now. We do have extraordinary environmental conditions that definitely need to be looked at and looked at in a very sober way, and where we're headed, unless we resolve those things. And I know I'm going to offend some people, and I know I'm not here to talk about politics. That's not what you paid for. But I got to tell you that I'm going to live at least long enough to see another administration, because I can't deal with this one.
Thank you. Also, you had great dance moves at the VIP party Friday night. Woo!
Good morning.
Yes.
Is this a good distance? You are a fabulous storyteller. You have great comedic timing. and I'm wondering what you would cite as your comedic influences.
Oh, see, you guys are full of questions I haven't heard before. That's amazing. That's amazing. Just don't get too personal. No, I don't know, whatever comedic talent I may have, it's just innate, and it just comes out. I don't think of any particular. I mean, there are comics and comedic actors who I have great respect for. Robin Williams was an extraordinary, example. But when I was a kid, okay. Nobody here is old enough to remember when I was a kid. But there was a comic actor named Danny Kaye.
Yes.
And I used to stand in front of the mirror and mimic Danny Kaye, and never. Let me see. He had the one song. No, I'm not going to remember it. Not when I need to. It may come to me in 10 minutes from now. But anyway, Danny Kaye I thought was terrific. And I liked Bud Abbott and Lucas Stella, which is really going back a while. I wasn't crazy about the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges, they just knock each other over the head. And I didn't see where the humor was, where the wit was in any of that. So that's about it, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. Of all the stories you've been a part of, whether it was Star Trek, Babylon 5, whichever, which was your favorite?
Good question. One I have been asked before. The truth of the matter is, I will be eternally grateful for the opportunity that Star Trek gave me. It's really shaped my career. It's shaped 50 years of my life, a little bit more. But as a challenge, as an artistic opportunity, Babylon 5 was more stimulating, was more exciting for me. And the character kept growing. J. Michael Straczynski, who was the writer, producer, would add things, and things that I had not initially considered as part of the character, elements of personality. And then I say, oh, now how do I get to include this, keep the character consistent, but make him part? So I was building the character as I played him, because he would write something somewhat different in each episode in which I appeared. So I had a great time doing that. It was also great because it was a different era, and I underscore that. So it's not going to sound so much a condemnation or a criticism, but being a different era, being a different time, the way casts were put together was on a much more equal basis. We were not so much a victim of the caste system, where you had the stars and you had the supporting players, as we were when we were doing Star Trek. And it always bothered me somewhat that although nobody purposely set out to offend us, the supporting characters, there was a distinction between the three main characters and the four other characters. And it was just kind of an unconscious thing that was always present and that you always felt. I'll give you an example. When we were doing Star Trek 3, the first day's shooting, they had me in this outfit with a white collar, sort of a Buster Brown collar, and a pink outfit, which I absolutely hated. This is terrible. And it was supposed to be the young Putkin, the great Russian poet. And Leonard came up to me the next day. And I've never seen Leonard quite this animated. And that's not a criticism. He was playing Mr. Spock all the time. All the time he was Mr. Spock. So, he said to me, I saw the dailies, and we're going to take you out of that costume. And I said, thank God. And he said, what? And I said, oh, I hate that. He says, why didn't you say something? And I didn't say anything because I didn't think I was allowed to. I didn't think I was in a position to criticize the uniform I was in, because I had been so conditioned to just going along, because that's what we did in the series. And I just went along. I mean, there was a few times when I bit my tongue during the series. But for the most part, I was grateful for the opportunity, and that was the environment. That was the environment at the time, where you genuflected to the lead and you nodded faintly, to the other cast members. And then, of course, we had a lead who luxuriated in that kind of role. So, yeah. So, what did you ask me? Did I answer it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Even as just a recurring character, you were one of the best things about Babylon 5. And people who haven't seen you in Babylon 5 should go to Amazon Prime Video right now because the whole series is there. Did you have a sense when you came in for your first season episode that the part would grow and become as big as it was? And what was the atmosphere like on the set back when you were working B5?
Okay, I think I can remember both of those questions. The first thing is, I had no idea that the character would. I had no idea that the character would recur. I mean, life is capricious. Being an actor is all the more so. I mean, your destiny frequently is not in your hands. It's not like you get a job and that when you're there long enough, you graduate to another position or another salary base or something, and you continue to build until it's more than it started. Acting is almost like an upside-down pyramid. You have no idea what's going to happen. And as a matter of fact, there's two experiences in my life, and as an actor, and if I can remember the other one, I mean, I know it now. Whether I'll remember it in 5 minutes or not is debatable. But this one was, J. Michael Straczynski had asked me, he knew me, we knew each other superficially through a writer named Harlan Ellison, who just passed away. And J. Michael asked me if I would, he had a radio show called The 25th Hour. And it was about science fiction, and it went on, I think, Saturday nights at midnight. And he asked me if I would read a script that he had written for Twilight Zone, the second coming of Twilight Zone, that never got produced, and to read it on the air. And I did. And, I'm an actor. Any chance to perform in something legitimate is always, an engaging idea. So I did it, and then I forgot about it. And then I had occasion. This is a little bit long-winded, so you got to bear with me. And everybody, please. Oh, you just remembered what the two questions were. Okay. So I called up Joe one day. He was still. Oh, he was working on Murder, She Wrote. I think so. That was the show he was producing. And I called him up, and I met him at Universal. It was really balls on me to ask him. So we weren't that close friends. And I asked him if we would collaborate on a comic book that I wanted to write. Because he had experience doing that, and I thought I would jump into that mix. And then he said to me, I'm doing this new television series. So he said he didn't have the time. He said, I'm doing this new series, a science fiction series. And I'm envisioning a scene. They have this kind of outdoor cafeteria. What was it called? The big place where everybody always met on B5.
The Zocalo?
Yeah, that. And he said, I have this moving shot of the camera moving past all the people and their conversations, and they come, and you're sitting there, and when they come back, you're just heard saying as it goes by you, well, on the Enterprise we did it this way, and then the camera just kept going. I said, that's great, that's really fun, I'd love to do that. And well, it turns out he had something else in mind for me, and it was a very nice part of one of two people who shrink to miniature size and are inside the captain's brain. And that was the part I was supposed to do. And that was a one-off. That was it, you know. And about 2.5 weeks before I was supposed to start shooting, I was in Chicago at a convention, and I had a heart attack. I had a massive heart attack. I had quadruple bypass. And I called Joe as soon as almost as I came out of the anesthesia, and I said, I'm not going to be available to do this. And he says, oh, okay, well, we'll try to hold it and do it when you're better. I thought, that's amazing. That's not Hollywood. That's not the Hollywood I know. I mean, that's truly amazing. When you find people like that, you never let go, you know. But as it turns out, they couldn't hold it because they were running out of scripts. So they shot that script, but he came up with Bester. So Bester, instead of being a one-off, and that's it, came back 12 times, or came back 11 times after that, and became a character that I really gloried in portraying. So that's this business. You know, it could have been one time, I wouldn't have had the heart attack, and that would have been the end of it. Or it became, as I say, became something that was, continued over the course of 5 seasons, and something that I really think of as, with great fondness. And the cast, it was, God, I'm remembering all this. Praise God, hallelujah. Let's see if I can get back up. Yeah. Okay. The people were great. I liked everybody. Bruce Boxleitner, Jerry Doyle, Christian, what's her name?
Claudia Christian?
Yeah, Claudia Christian. I love all those people. They were very, very nice to me. Of course, it was another time. It was 10, 15 years after Star Trek. And there was just the aura had already begun to build. This thing that I thought we were going to fade away. I thought with each successive new series, we would be less and less in the public's mind. We would fade into unconsciousness. And my astonishment was that rather than have that happen, it just reinforced us as a presence. And we developed a kind of a patina, that antiques get after a while. And people, instead of dismissing us or forgetting us, and I say this trying to sound objective and not totally egomaniacal, but we were something to cherish because we were vintage. It was that antiques feeling. You don't want to break a vintage vase. You don't want to break. So that's what actually evolved for particularly the original cast. We were the first. For a long time, I thought we were going to be the only, but it was nice. So when I came on the show, everybody was equal. Everybody was equal. Bill Mooney and Bruce and Jerry and everybody had the same level of respect. And to be incorporated into that so quickly and so easily was a really nice feeling. It was different from what I had experienced on Star Trek. So I think that's the answer to your question.
It is. Thank you so much.
Okay.
First of all, it's a pleasure to join you on the bridge up here today. I wanted to ask you, what was your experience like as an actor and maybe even personally in your transition from the original series to starting the motion pictures, or maybe the first motion picture with Star Trek?
Yeah, again, I did my first Star Trek series episodes in 1967. And this was 1978, I think, or 79, something like that. Yeah. So I'm already 10 years older. So there's a certain amount of experience that just happens as you grow older. And, and there's a perspective may change subtly, how you think about things. Things that I was not comfortable with in my early 30s. By the time I was approaching 40, I felt much more available to, without prejudice, without pre-existing perspectives. So, so that just happens naturally. So I don't think I consciously made an effort to be more mature or to be more anything than I was as the character had been on the series. I think they wrote the character a little bit more maturely, as should be. But again, I didn't take any time assessing any differences. I just let it happen as I read the dialogue. I saw the dialogue and I just let it, what was going to happen, happen.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Hey, Walter.
Hi.
My name's Lisa. I stopped by and talked to you the other day, trying to remember when I last saw you, which was back in the early 80s. I was telling you it was in North Carolina. You were out in Lemoore. To help you remember a little bit more, maybe, was that you had to, when you were leaving that convention, you were going to do the pilot for Bring 'Em Back Alive.
Oh.
You remember doing, and that never took off, but to help you remember a little bit more.
Well, I did it. I mean, we shot it.
Yeah, but it never, I don't think it ever aired.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because
It
I
did
looked.
air. It aired. It aired.
Okay, fine. Fine. No, I thought. My question is, all the stuff that you're given at different conventions that you used to be given, where did all that end up? I want mine back. See?
You mean tangible, material things?
Yeah.
What tangible things have I been given?
Oh, I gave you a nice little crochet, cross stitch thing of the preamble and had my little photograph. I was probably about 12.
I keep it next to my pillow.
Of course you do.
I do have a, I might have told you this the other day. I do have a funny story, to me it's funny, about North Carolina and Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy and I, these were the days when we had mom and pop videotape stores opening. It was a very hot item, you know, selling videotapes. And we were invited from time to time to be at an opening of a new videotape store. And Jimmy and I were both invited with the understanding that we would come in uniform. And I had never done that, and I never intended to. And I certainly wouldn't have if they hadn't offered me so much money. So we're in a very, very swanky hotel in Charlotte, waiting for the limo, which I'm assuming had a sauna and, you know, all the other amenities that go with, you know, these stretch limos. Waiting in the lobby, in uniform, and a young woman checks in and sees us and comes over and says, "Y'all take my bags to the room now." Wasn't quite as humbling as that. And in fact, I had failed as a bellhop. I had gotten a job between school years, a summer job, at the Beverly Hills Hotel. It was a big, swanky hotel. It's been featured in a lot of motion pictures. And this is before I was acting. And I was introduced to the head bellhop. A very, very, you know, auspicious and important position, the head bellhop. But he carried himself as if he was God's left hand, you know. And so the young man says, "Sir, this is the new boy who's going to be the bellhop." Turns to the other guy and says, "Tell him to comb his hair." So I whipped out the comb. "Tell him to comb it in the bathroom." Well, obviously, I lasted 4 days, and that was it. No more bellhop.
And the only other thing is, I read that your wife was also in an episode of Babylon 5.
She was in 2.
And anything else that she's been in?
She's been in a couple of Star Trek movies.
Okay.
And beyond that, she's had her own career.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I was actually going to ask you about the video game stores. I saw you at a video game, a VHS store opening one time, doing autographs.
Oh, yeah?
I was going to ask you for a story, but you just did one. Well, how have your like fan experiences doing conventions and stuff? You know, from those early days where it was all just sort of a sad little affair at a strip mall. I saw you in Virginia. You and George were there, and it was wonderful. But you know, like attending conventions like this versus doing things like that. You know, how did that kind of, you know, develop, and what did you think about how different the experiences sort of became?
Well, the young lady has a soft voice, so I'm not sure everybody heard what she said. She said to me that I'm the most extraordinary good-looking man that she's ever seen. Well, she asked me how conventions have evolved for me over the course of years and how I see them now as perhaps when I first started. Well, when I first started, I felt it was just amazing. We did the first couple in New York at a hotel, and the line was literally twice around the block. I mean, it was out the door and down the street and back again twice. In fact, the fire people came and they said you had to break up the line and so on. So that was really an amazing time. And I felt very self-conscious about it. I mean, on the one hand, I thought it was amazing and wonderful. On the other hand, I said, how much can I actually participate in this, in this applause? How much can I personally feel comfortable with when I had so little to do on the show? You know, I could understand Bill Shatner and DeForest Kelley and Leonard Nimoy, because they were the engine that drove the ship. And I was just there to push buttons. So it made me feel, it made me yearn for more to do on the show, to prove myself, you know, to make it worthwhile, to give the audience a real reason to applaud, and not simply as somebody who's grabbing onto somebody's coattails and going along for the ride. And I had to deal with that for several years until we started making the movies. When we started making the movies, I felt I was contributing a little bit more, and I could bask in some of that applause without being self-conscious about it. But it's always been fun. I've always enjoyed being at conventions. I can't think of one bad convention. I might have had a bad moment or two here and there, but I can't think of any convention that I went away from, you know, with a sour taste. I grew up in during World War II, and I grew up with the sense that all Germans were born that way, and they were evil incarnate. That's the way I grew up. That's the kind of culture I lived in and the environment. And it took me, that's one of the things that changed over the years. It took me 30 years, well, 25 years anyway, to step back and have a new point of view about people in general. And that you consider our history and the genocide that we committed on Native Americans and slavery, and you begin to realize people aren't born that way. There may be a genetic potential coming from a need to survive. So anger and hostility and aggression can initially start there. But all cultures and all religions and all races have all experienced inhumanity to man. You know, it's just, and you understand that, and you realize you don't blame, without any qualifications. You don't blame a people for evil. You know, it's something that you're taught, and we have the potential to learn, unfortunately, but we also can learn that we can be good, and there are people in every walk of life, in every country and every culture that are good, and that it's those people that we need to praise and applaud. And I have no idea where I got to this point. God, what were you asking me?
I was asking about video store openings.
Video stories. Okay.
All right. So, what is your most fond childhood memory?
Of what?
Of anything.
My childhood memory? I remember my mother's breast and my. No. I don't really. No. But it was there, yeah. Anything else?
If you want to keep going, that's fine.
What?
If you want to keep going, that's fine.
It's more like I'm.
If you want to keep going, that's fine.
Oh, if I want to keep going?
Yeah.
Where am I going?
I know.
Oh, childhood memories. I'll give you a childhood memory. It's sort of appropriate to the occasion or to the circumstances here. I remember being about 4 years old and being on a train. No, I must have been five or six. Being on a troop train with all soldiers. And I was the only kid. My mother and I were there. Everybody else that were packed in were all soldiers. And they're all in uniform. And somehow I started telling moron jokes. You know what a moron joke is? Why did the guy bring the ladder to the house? Because to the roof of the house, to the roof because he heard the drinks were on the house. You know, those were the moron jokes. And I was telling these jokes. I was the only little kid there, and everybody was laughing. Now, whether they were laughing at me and I just didn't understand it is a possibility. But I think they were laughing because they thought the stuff I was telling was funny. And I said, this is a good thing. This is something I could do forever, you know, having entertain people and have them enjoy what I'm doing. Yeah, so that's one of my earliest memories, one of the good ones anyway. Okay?
Nope, I think I'm good.
What?
Well, I think I'm good here.
Okay. Okay.
Hello. So you mentioned earlier that you've traveled to Russia, and I was just curious what the Russian people think of the character Chekhov.
Well, that's an interesting question. The young lady asked me what the Russian people think of the character Chekhov. I wasn't invited there as an actor from Star Trek. I was invited there as an actor from Babylon 5. Babylon 5 was playing prime time in Moscow. Star Trek was real late night. It's like 2 in the morning. And if it had caught on, it had to have been years ago. Certainly, it wasn't playing when we were shooting it. You know, it definitely was that Iron Curtain. But I was invited there because of Bester. And everybody loved Babylon 5. So I got to travel through Moscow and Red Square and the Kremlin and then go to St. Petersburg on that amazing subway they have. You know, their subways are built around art. There's one station that's all in mosaic art. Others are paintings. And in any case, it was a very nice experience for me. My dad come from there. My dad was a devout communist. He didn't set off any bombs or send cryptic messages to the Soviet Union. You know, he just was a Marxist. He believed in a philosophy of life and living where people could be the wealth could be more equally distributed, and that people would have a greater sense of humanity, which was for some reason very subversive at the time. And then, of course, there was the House Un-American Activities Committee, which came down on all these American Hollywood screenwriters and put a lot of them in jail. And then Joe McCarthy, who was a terrible human being, who was rooting out commies in the State Department, the commies that did not exist, but scared our country. It was the modern witch hunt of that day. So, God almighty, what is it that you asked me?
I I was just curious if you knew what the Russians thought of Chekhov.
Oh,
But
yes.
Your story is just as interesting.
Okay. So they had a convention. It was very rudimentary, very kind of primitive convention, but it was very sweet. And they had the guy who translated my Bester dialogue into Russian. He was there, and he had written a poem to me. Unfortunately, it went like this. Which of course means nothing, and it meant nothing to me because I didn't understand Russian. So, but I could see he was very moved in reciting the poem. So I felt that it must be something good, even if I didn't understand what he was saying. So that's my memories of being in Russia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What did you think of the Tim Allen movie Galaxy Quest?
I loved it. I thought it was great fun. It was great fun. They really did it right. I mean, they had the flavor of Star Trek, and certainly, but it wasn't Star Trek. I mean, they did have the guy run around without his shirt on. We have to acknowledge that. But whoever that guy was, I have trouble remembering him. In any case, no, I thought that was great fun. I thought it was great fun. I'm not so fond of this new show that's really tries to have the look of Star Trek, TV show.
The Orville.
Yeah, what's it called?
The Orville.
Orville, yeah. It kind of feels flat to me. You know, occasionally there's a story idea. I've only seen about 3 or 4 episodes. And is that a big favorite? Is everybody getting behind that? Yeah. Okay.
I've heard that when doing TV shows, you often don't have much time to rehearse or do retakes. But then in movies, sometimes you might do a particular scene over and over and over again. I'm thinking of a particular scene in Wrath of Khan, which you've probably been asked about a million times, but any particular stories or things you remember about preparing, or how many times you had to put the helmet on your head with the earworm?
No.
No?
What I remember is that the lift they had me on, you know, they had it strapped to my back and down between my legs. When they lifted that, it hurt. I gotta tell you, all the pressure was there, and oh my God, if my voice went up a couple of octaves, that's the reason. You know? But the story that I've told a million times, but has a new ending to, is when that script came down, Harv Bennett had given us, I think, everybody, a copy, and I saw lots of little. It was an early edition of the script, a very early edition. Wait, let me get this straight. Now, what was the point I was going to make? I'm having a great conversation with myself up here. No, people would ask me in Star Trek 2, yeah, and Bennett was in charge and talked to. They asked me, how is it that Khan knew Chekhov when Chekhov wasn't in Space Seed, you know? So, and the backstory, which I tried to tell, was I had gotten a preliminary edition of that script to look at, and I saw a lot of little mistakes in it, and Bennett and his main guy weren't all that familiar with Star Trek, so I pointed out a lot of things, tiny things, insignificant things, but things that I knew that the Star Trek fans would immediately, you know, grab onto. So I checked all those off. I didn't check off the part where Khan says, "Your face, I never forget," you know, because I knew I felt if I did that, they might say, "Oh, well, if you weren't in that episode, let's get George Takei to do it. So, faced with my professional integrity, I said, screw it. So I didn't tell anybody, and then I started getting the questions at conventions. How come you... And I said, well, Chekhov was in that episode. He was working on the third deck behind the boiler room. And he was very ill with a condition called Malapropsky's malady, a kind of 23rd century version of Montezuma's Revenge. And he had been ensconced in the bathroom for hours and hours while poor Mr. Khan, his genetically engineered kidneys, about to explode, pounded pitifully on the bathroom door, begging to be allowed in, until finally the door opened, Chekhov steps out, and he grabs him and says, "Your face, I will never forget." So I've told that story a million times, but recently, within the last year, I was approached by a young man who knew the story and said, "Is this true? Is this how it went?" And I said, "No. I said, I made that up, for a reason why to explain it, but, it was sort of tongue-in-cheek." And he looked at me for a moment and looked at the floor and looked back at me, my hand to whoever governs our destiny, and said to me, "Well, I'm going to accept it as canon." Okay. So that's my addition. Yes.
Hello again. I just wanted to ask, when you got the script for Star Trek Generations, were you a little upset that Chekhov was still just a commander?
Well, it's an interesting thing. First of all, after Star Trek, okay, wait. That's going back too far. I'll just stick with this Next Generation. Their initial thought was to use Bill Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley in Next Generation movie. 2 of the 3 turned it down. Bill Shatner decided to do it, and I'm going to be very generous and not explain why. And so then they came back to the rest of us, and I'm trying to remember the order of all this, and I think they asked us all to do it. No, they asked us all to do it original. Nah, screw it. I don't remember what happened. But I do know that Bill and that Leonard and DeForest turned it down. So then they turned to Jimmy and I and said, "Would you take over?" And I read the script and I said, this doesn't in any way put a period to our adventures in Star Trek. This is an ellipsis. This is not a period, this is an ellipsis. And it doesn't give us any kind of satisfying sense of fulfillment, that we're finished with the story. I really believe that was important. I mean, the money was actually quite good. But I said, I'm not going to, I don't want to do it. Leonard and DeForest had turned it down for their reasons, and I felt pretty much the same way. I just didn't see the point. See, I was upset with Star Trek VI, because I thought that's the movie where we should have had our moment. Each of us, everyone, have a moment. And they didn't. They didn't do that. I had great moments in 4, I had good moments in 2, but this was going to be our last movie. And this one, everybody should have had a moment for a curtain call. And I felt very strongly about that. So I was a real pain in the neck during the shooting of 6. I was angry at everybody. In any case, this was going to compound it as far as I was concerned. Because I know why we were there. We were there simply to exploit the characters. Jimmy Doohan and Walter Koenig from the original Star Trek are also in this movie, But that was the extent of their motivation, because they gave us the same bloody lines that DeForest and Leonard had. I'm giving all these medical terms and things, and if you recall, I was in the infirmary, the med quarters for part of the time. So I said, no. They said, what? You're going to turn it down? And I said, yeah. I said, it doesn't give me a sense of fulfillment. It doesn't give me that period that I'm looking for. So he said, what would? And I said, okay, what I would like, and are we getting late in the game here? Is there somebody talking about time? I saw somebody, I thought somebody, anyway, out of the corner of my, anyway, so I said, okay, I'll do it. If you have the scene where Kirk is blown out of the ship, I said, no, that wasn't a scene where we brought out the dancing shoes, and no, I wanted just the opposite. I said, I would like to have a moment. We've just lost our captain for good, forever, as far as we know. And I wanted the moment between Scotty and Chekhov, where they had a moment to let that sink in, and to absorb it, and to feel the pain of the loss of our captain. A challenge, acting-wise, but one that I felt I was up to. So, and the writer was sitting there in the office with Bennett and I, and he wrote this all down. And I said, I don't want it to subvert the story. I don't want it to become the Chekhov story of sorrow or something. I just think this is 30 seconds, 40 seconds, where we can see some real emotion, where the character is not just expository. You know what expository means? It means that it's there to explain the plot without any personal investment. It's not about Chekhov saying, my God, I'm so scared. There's something out there that's going to kill us. I can't believe it. And what's going to happen? Chekhov would say, Captain, there is something out there that I don't know what it is. And then I give it to him, and then he tells it is. So I'm just there to set up the story. That's Chekhov's responsibility, as well as George's and Michelle's for most of the time. So I just want that moment. I want that moment. I want that moment for many reasons, not the least of which was I want to give something back to the fans. I want to make them feel that their appreciation over the course of years was based on something other than that I wore that uniform and was part of that group, an amorphous, undefined part of that group. So they said, okay. So we signed the contract. It was a substantial amount of money. I got the script. There it was. It was right there in the script. This scene was there. We got on the set. We shot it. The scene was there. My hand to whatever you believe. There were people on the set who were off camera who were crying. The scene was extremely well done. And of course I can say this because you'll never see it. And you'll never know because it was not in any final edition of the story. It was edited out. And my feeling is, being such a cynical human being, that was what they intended all along. You know, give me my moment, and then for the sake of for their reasons, to cut it out.
Sir, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Walter Koenig.